Hey, what's going on, Giants and Jets fans? Welcome to the latest episode of our Talk is Cheap Giants and Jets podcast from NJ Advanced Media, the Star Ledger, and NJ.com. Daryl Slater here, Andy Vasquez joining me in a minute. It's Tuesday morning right now, January the 2nd. Happy New Year, happy holidays. Hope you guys had a great holiday season. We were off last week. Well, we just didn't do one of these last week. So it's been 2 weeks exactly. And really, since then, just a quick recap. Obviously, last time we did this, the Jets had just gotten blown out in Miami. Then on Christmas Eve, of course, they beat the Commanders. They almost blow that game, but they wind up winning it narrowly. And then they go to Cleveland on a short week on a Thursday night and get blown out by Joe Flacco. Jets 6-10 at this point. They'd already been eliminated from the playoffs when we last talked to you guys. As far as the Giants go, they are 5-11. They've lost three straight games since their three-game Tommy DeVito winning streak. And Tommy DeVito, of course, got benched Christmas Day in Philadelphia. And that loss where the Giants almost came back in the second half, sort of the flip of what happened with the Jets on Christmas Eve. They wind up losing in Philadelphia 5-10 at that point. They get knocked out of playoff contention, of course. I mean, the Saints game already essentially did knock them out. And and then they have a mistake-filled mess of a game on New Year's Eve, a very winnable game. And they played hard and played well at times against a pretty good Rams team that's in the playoffs. And so that one drops the Giants to 5-11. So that's where we stand here with both these teams. We're not going to go back and recap, obviously, the games, but as far as the draft, the Giants now, I mean, they can still technically get the number 2 overall pick. Number 1's locked in for the Bears from Carolina. And then 2, 3, and 4 are three teams that are 4-12: Washington, New England, Arizona. Then comes the Giants at 5-11, number 5. The thing to remember here, the Jets are at 8, by the way, at 6-10. The thing to remember here is that the Giants currently, and it looks like will have the strength of schedule tiebreaker over every single team in the top 8. And mainly, this is important because if somehow Washington, New England, and Arizona all win, and the Giants lose this week on Sunday against the Eagles, then I guess it's possible. Look, that the Giants could jump to number 2. We'll get into all that in a minute, and there's a lot of what ifs at play here. The Jets, of course, go to New England, and some interesting storylines there, even though both these teams are eliminated. And shoot, the Eagles trying to get right too. But we'll stick here, of course, to Jets and Giants, and I'm joined as usual by Andy Vasquez. What's going on?
Not much, Daryl. Not much. New year. Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas are safe, which I'm sure Jets fans are happy
I
about.
forgot
And
that part. Yep, yep.
yeah, lot of question marks headed into this offseason. But yeah, you summed it up well. Not exactly, the vote of confidence from Woody Johnson didn't exactly seem to inspire the boys, as they say. Given that performance that we saw in the second half against Washington and the entire game, especially the first half in Cleveland. So we'll see what it all means. But yeah, a lot of questions for the Jets and Giants, and almost all of them related to the offseason, which is almost here.
Yeah, and we've been talking quite a bit about the offseason in the recent weeks. And now this is our first podcast where both teams are eliminated from playoff contention officially. And we'll do more offseason talk next week. We don't want to get too much into it. I mean, I think you guys know a lot of the things we've been covering. We can hit the big offseason storylines, just broad brush here. But in terms of in terms of the coaching change stuff, I mean, at this point, Brian Dable, I think it would be a stunner if he was let go. But that said, there'll be the typical hot seat prelude to a hot seat coach thing where there are fairly significant staff changes. I'd be surprised if Wink Martindale's back. I mean, Brian Dable could technically lose as in like fire or part ways with mutual parting, whatever. All three of his coordinators. It's entirely possible. So that's sort of how this typically goes, and so we'll see how things shake out from there. But this is we were talking before we got on about one kind of big picture thing that ties these two franchises together is just so much change that's occurred. If you look back at the last time both these teams had consistent stability, you're talking about the Tom Coughlin, Jerry Reese Giants. You're talking about the Rex Ryan, Mike Tannenbaum Jets, and of course, since those eras, the Jets have had three head coaches: Todd Bowles, Adam Gase, and now Robert Saleh, and three GMs: John Idzik, who overlapped with Rex Ryan, and and Mike McCagnon and now Joe Douglas. And of course, the Giants, four coaches, Ben McAdoo, Pat Shermer, Joe Judge, and now Brian Dable, and two GMs and Dave Gettleman and Joe Shane. So a lot of change, a ton of change. I mean, this is the first, Andy and we checked this before we came on. This is the first off season since after the 2013 season where there has not been a coaching change for either team. And we'll, right? So like in 20 after,
or a team in the playoffs. Yeah.
but I think coaching changed, but oh no, maybe there's one. So let's
Yeah.
go through.
2016, the Giants made the playoffs. There was a coaching change or no coaching change. And then last year, same thing. But,
Right. I'm
but
sorry.
there's been one of those two things either, either year, like
So
every
let's just
year.
set aside the
Yeah.
playoffs. But okay, so last year there
Yeah.
was no coaching change. Of course, I stumbled on that one.
Yeah. In
Last year,
2016 as well, I think.
2016 and 2013. So now we have two consecutive off seasons of no coaching change, which is quite the change because after 2014, the Jets fired Rex Ryan. After 2015, Coughlin was gone. After 2016, as we mentioned, no coaching change there. After 2017, Ben McAdoo gone. After 2018, right, Todd Bowles
Yep.
gone. After 2019, Pat Shermer, Giants let him go. After 2020, Adam Gase gone. After 2021, Joe Judge out. And so there you have it. That's how it's all unfolded. 2013, 2016, 2022, and 2023, the recent years with no coaching change for either team. And of course, 2012 and 2011 before that, when as we mentioned, those coach and GM combinations had some stability. And even shoot, even after 2016, there was no, of course, GM change for either team either. No GM change after last year. And no GM change after 2013 because Tannenbaum was gone after 2012. So anyway, but that's a long way of saying that I will say, even though there is the quote unquote, that gives you the impression of stability, right? Well, both of these coaches are very much on the hot seat after like super underwhelming years in 2023.
Yeah. I mean, doesn't mean just because the toaster hasn't been used doesn't mean it's not warm. So it's not odd. So, well, yeah, I had to get in the toaster reference there because no coaches have gone to the toaster, which is unusual here. But yeah, I mean, I think obviously Robert Saleh, I mean, when you see the way they played in Cleveland, and if they get humiliated by Bill Belichick, I know Woody is, said publicly he's going to keep them, but you know, I think still anything is mildly possible there. I still don't think so, but you can't. You remember a few years ago, Joe Judge was very strongly reportedly safe. I can't remember if the Giants actually came out and said it. I don't think they did. But things can change on that front. But yeah, there's going to be a burden for both these teams next year to get it done. And the Jets don't really do in season firings, but it's hard to see how next year, if it's not underwhelming, how they don't try to salvage it by doing something. So I
Good
do
point.
think, yeah, I do think that puts Robert Saleh in this kind of weird phase, this different kind of. We've already seen him scrambling. We've already seen him not happy with the questions about his future and about his level of anger, whatever, or a lack of level of anger. And I think it's going to be very, very on tilt at the beginning of next year if he's back, which I expect him to be, and trying to make the narrative seem like this is a team that's making progress, or this is a team that if it's not having success, coming up with reasons or excuses for that. So it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of works because it hasn't been, a pleasant or smooth experience for him this year, especially as the losing has piled up, and you've got a fan base that has the frustration from more than a decade of being without the playoffs and being the longest team in the country, major professional sports team to be dealing with this. There's not any excuses that are going to work. So even if they are valid, and I don't think this year they were as valid as the Jets wanted them to be in terms of for why they weren't a competitive team. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that all plays out. But anybody who lives around here knows, fan patience is not exactly a well stocked reserve right now.
Yeah, and you can't hard to blame Jet fans and of course Giants fans too, who got teased last year with last year, the playoff win. Uh, but with as far as Salah, I mean, their defense got spanked by Joe Flacco the other night. His defense, and the way he handled himself after the game, the guy does not have seem to. I mean, Dable ultimately results won't matter, right? No matter if you're grumpy and don't say much,
Exactly.
or if you're verbose and emotional, whatever. I mean, you just win is what matters. But these two coaches, a little bit of a contrast in public styles, but very similar in that they've both lost a lot this year and both lost. Um, well, we'll get to what Dable's done since the midish point of last year, but you wonder how Salah. What'd you make of how he handled Thursday night and just his seemingly consistent lack of composure?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird. You don't usually see him get angry at questions. It's usually kind of like a lashing out, or he says something that maybe he's not supposed to say. But that was a kind of a first where he really didn't like the question and really, wasn't able to conceal it. And then it made him look kind of silly. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, on the term and on the scale of coach meltdowns, this doesn't even really register. He just like basically stared down a reporter and said, "Do you want me to? What do you?" Basically, the question was, "Are you angry? Because it doesn't seem like you're angry. Can you just give us an indication of what's bubbling below the surface?" And then I don't know about that question. This is how he responded. Then he stared at the reporter for like 2 seconds, and that's, "What do you want me to do? Flip over the podium?" Now that probably wouldn't have been a great time to correct that it's a lectern, not a podium. But the thought did go through my mind. And then when he said that, the reporter says, uh, "You can do whatever you want." For a second, I was like, "Hey, maybe we'll get a table flip." And then Sal looked away, to the wall for the last 3 seconds. A PR person wrapped it up, and he stormed out of the room. And I'm not 100% sure. I was 100% sure the moment that Salah voiced his displeasure with the question by muttering under his breath that it was a crap question. Other people in the room thought it was the PR guy. Either way, he was pissed. The PR guy was pissed. It
Well,
wasn't a
it's a
happy
fair
moment.
question. I mean, our
Yeah, and
job
it's
is
a fair question. Yeah, it is a
I
fair
think
question.
people need to understand
Fans are wondering.
these are artificial settings that these coaches are in up there, and it's prepared, rehearsed, and it's you know what our job is to get honesty and emotional and factual honesty out of people, right? And so, how are you really feeling? Is a totally valid question, because they had just gotten spanked in a way that you had not expected, right? Their defense looked terrible against Joe Flacco, right?
Yep.
And it wasn't just that they lost a low scoring game where their offense did nothing again. That would have been pretty standard. I mean, there was plenty of reasons for Robert Saleh to be very angry, which he clearly was. He just was trying to mask it and be supportive of his team, all that usual stuff. But he's a grown man. No one's forcing him to respond in any way. These guys are essentially in a lot of ways like politicians, and then
Yeah.
and some of them handle themselves in different ways in terms of concealing their true emotions. But yeah, no, it's a totally fair question. I mean, because fans are angry,
Absolutely.
right? So
Yeah, this
like,
has been week. I mean, that question's been weeks in the making, and for them to be surprised by it is, I mean, how? I mean, fans have been complaining on social media about like how much he's smiling, how stoic he is, all of that. So it's not like this wasn't. This was a question that could have been asked now for weeks after every loss. Um, so that part of it wasn't
well,
surprising. And I think like almost like he wants credit for finally taking that was the first press conference, by the way, where he's kind of taken not kind of where he took full responsibility and said it's on me to fix it like 5 times. Whereas 2 weeks ago in Miami, it was on the offensive line and you can't do anything. And it was not a good look. So like I don't know, like it's fine that good finally you took full accountability, but it's not as powerful 4 days after the owner says you're coming back next year.
yep,
Doesn't
exactly.
really mean anything. So I think it's like a whole combination of things where like feels he's not getting a fair shake. But I can tell you this guy is getting a fair shake in terms of the questions that we ask. If anything, it could be worse, a lot worse than it is. because we're not masochists who want to keep asking the same freaking question over and over again, but it could be asked every time. Like, why? What have you done to show that you've gotten better?
Well, that's a question. To the best of my knowledge, and I haven't been around the Giants this year, but here's a more pointed question that probably would have rankled them a little more. Why do you deserve to continue to coach this team? Why should you continue to be the coach? The owner just came
Exactly.
out and said that he believes in you, but like explain to people why, given your record, especially late in the season, why you deserve to continue to coach this team because the record, and I'm looking it up right now, and off the top of my head, I don't know his career record. Obviously, this year,
It's
6-10. He's 17
33
and
and
33.
17. Yeah,
He went
33.
4 and 13, 7 and 10, and 6 and 10. And last year, of course, the meltdown. We've been through that. We mentioned it. What they've done since last year, right? So they opened 6 and 3, and they closed
Six
one.
and four last year, yeah. Or
Oh, six and 3,
7 and 4, my bad. Yeah. 7-4
seven
last
and
year.
four. Okay, so do it that like that. Okay, 5 and 2, then 7 and 4, right? Since then they went 0 and 6. So he is 6 and 16.
Since starting 7-4, yeah.
6 and 16. I mean, that is awful. And we're
Mhm.
gonna get to how that mirrors Dable in just a second. But yeah, like why do you? This is your third year now. I mean, anyone could look at it and say like, well, the owner is probably saying, well, obviously he hasn't gotten a shot with Aaron Rodgers, right? I mean, but it would be interesting to hear Salah just say that, like, well, I haven't gotten a shot to coach the quarterback we want to. Okay, fine, that's an explanation, but he, as far as I know, is not faced that pointed question. So if they want to get upset about something that he has
He's
control over how he answers these things. I mean, come on.
Yeah, well, he's taken close to those questions. Like last week, he was asked what makes him confident he can turn the Jets around,
Yeah.
and basically goes off and says something like, "I'm the right coach. I could sit here and give you reasons why I'm the right coach, but I am the right coach, and we're going to win a championship." And then he was asked, "Well, what are some of those reasons?" And he says, "We could talk about that in the off season." And then the reporter who asked that said, "Well, we got time now." And then, of course, that was the end of the press conference. So,
That's great. Oh, good,
yeah,
good
that was again
question.
after the win, the same day where he was, told that he was going to, where the public was told that he was going to be staying. So that was after the win over
Okay.
the
Yeah.
Commanders. So it's not like, but anyway, the point is he's not getting. It's not this hostile like. It's not pleasant, but it's not like the questioning has been unfair. Like you just said, they've been terrible. I mean, you can't consider yourself to be a contender, then get your ass kicked by all these teams that have also, suffered terrible injuries. And oh, why? By the way, the team that just suffered as many terrible injuries as you just beat you terribly and still is alive for the number one seed in your conference. So,
Yeah. And with Joe, yeah, with a
it's
guy
not an
who you
excuse. Yeah,
with who you guy who you did not want to sign, a guy who was in your building last
exactly.
year.
For 3 years, for the last 3 years,
Yeah, and they
and you
didn't
got
want him.
nothing out of him like what he just did to you. Also, at any point.
Yeah, everyone thought he was washed up, and clearly Kevin Stefanski and the Browns have proven otherwise with Joe Flacco. As far as the Giants go, and we'll get back to the Jets and forward-looking stuff in a minute. The current state of the Giants is this. I mean, they find ways to lose games instead of win games. Yes, they've had a lot of blowout losses this year, 7 of them. Then the Eagles game kind of falls in that middle ground. But then 3 games where they just completely botched the Jet game, the Bills game, and then the Rams game for various reasons of just awful unforced errors, poor uh, coaching decisions like running the ball the other day on second down instead of trying to push the ball a little bit farther down the field when you had a kicker with a weakened leg, an aging kicker in Mason Crosby, and that winds up being the difference. Of course, yes, flawed quarterback play plays into all of this too, certainly for both teams, and it was on display there with Tyrod Taylor short arming that 2-point conversion attempt to Saquon Barkley. But again, I think that these things only matter in the game was meaningless. So these things only matter in the sense of what do they show us about not Tyrod Taylor. Okay, great. He's not going to be with a team, probably not going to be with a team next year. What do they show us about Brian Dable, the guy who will be back? Can we count can Giant fans count on him? Can you depend on him? I mean, he started 7-2 last year as a rookie head coach. In regular season games since then, when he's played his starters, so setting aside week 18 last year, he is now 7-15-1. That is horrendous. So obviously the competition was stepped up this year. He's going to get plenty of goodwill, and it's pretty much exhausted now, right? Off what he did last year when winning that wild card playoff game against the fading Vikings team in Minnesota. But hey, give him credit for it. Give the Giants credit for that. They shocked everybody with how successful they were last year. Yeah. Did they get lucky? Yes. They won a lot of close games, but they found ways to win games, and now they're finding ways this season to lose games. The resilience of last year, and again, yes, they've been blown out in 7 games. We get that. They're not a legit contender. They got smashed by every legit contender they played this year, and also smashed by the Saints, who are not a top of the league team. Smashed by Seattle, who's same boat, middling. Smashed by the Niners and the Cowboys and the Dolphins. So yeah, there's a lot of concerns here about how Brian Dable, how he projects going forward. What Brian Dable are you going to get? The NFL's darling from last year, or the guy who's kind of looked like a dud at times this year, especially given that, say Wink Martindale's gone. What defensive wizard, and remember, Dable's an offensive minded coach, is going to want to come work for Dable, who will be on the hot seat probably next year. And there could be the new quarterback caveat to that. But and who also has kind of got this reputation now of being a guy who can be difficult to work for. Uh, who's lining up to take that job, right? I mean, and Dable needs a strong defensive coordinator because of his background in offense. And so as far as the offense goes, will he take over play calling? There's a lot of questions that linger here going into year 3 for a coach who, the bloom has come off the rose, or whatever the saying is. The shine has kind of come off of him a little bit here, a lot bit, right? And so the Giants now 9 losing seasons in 11 years, out of the playoffs for the 10th time in 12 seasons. We knew this. This was all locked up when they lost to the Saints, for crying out loud. The losing season thing was, and essentially the playoff thing was. As far as, if you look at what the Giants have done since 2017, or since 2016, right? So starting with the 2017 season, they have won about 32% of their games. This was entering Sunday. So now the number dipped slightly, right? If you could compare that to like the 1964, 1980 era for the Giants, when they were, the 70s was, everyone's talked about how brutal it was. Now they missed the playoffs from 64 to 80, different playoff format, whatever. They won 35% of their games during those 17 seasons. So longtime Giants fans, you can see why, even with these 2 playoff appearances in 16 and last year, and the playoff win last year, that this feels so familiar. This feels like that. This feels like those miserable years. So obviously, the future and their decisions here with what Joe Shane does, especially quarterback, will play a significant role in where this team goes going forward. So we'll pivot here to a little bit of future talk. We'll get into it more next week. So let's break down like the draft real quick, where things are. Obviously, the Bears are at 1. They're locked in because the Panthers are 2-14, and their owner's throwing drinks on people in Jacksonville. What a joke. And so,
Hey, that guy makes Woody Johnson look like a stable owner.
yeah, I mean, what a clown. And I'm referring to Tepper specifically, but
Yes.
I know people have, and for sometimes good reason, said that about Woody Johnson. But in this case, Tepper, the Bears, I wonder, will they draft a quarterback? Or will they decide to stick with Justin Fields, who they traded up for in 2021 in that deal with the Giants? To me, that's a really fascinating one, right? Because they've played a little bit better lately. Will they give Fields a 4th year? How do you, because that could really tip the draft. They could wind up trading out of that pick, right?
Yeah, it feels like no.
No, what? They won't
Like
keep him?
they won't, they're going to pick a quarterback.
Yeah.
It just feels like I don't know. The way that they've deployed Fields it hasn't felt like it's been competently, right? Like they haven't taken advantage. I know it's in part to keep him healthy, but they haven't been taking advantage of his great strength. So, I mean, I guess it's possible, but the fact that they won't let him run, and that's his strength, like tells me that they don't trust him to stay healthy,
Yeah.
and they don't see his style as like his best style as a quarterback is one that is conducive to them winning. So my guess would be they move on. Um, I still think Fields can be, pretty good given what we've seen. And when you look at his numbers too and start comparing them to like, somebody who was picked around the same time as him and Zach Wilson, I mean, he's thrown a lot more touchdowns. So
Oh yeah.
at least like there is, yeah, yes, there's the mistakes, yes, there's the injury concerns, but there's also like a lot of high level production, not just in the running game, but in the passing game too. So I think it's not a slam dunk, and they could be wrong to do it, but I think my gut is that they'll move on.
And if you don't take a quarterback at one, you trade out, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
and so the thing with
Especially in this draft.
Wilson was drafted in 2021. Same with Fields, right? So the Jets pulled the plug on Zach Wilson after 2 years, and Fields now that has gotten 3 years, and it pays generally to be bold at quarterback, right? If you have an opportunity to get a franchise quarterback, you generally take it. And so we all know that Caleb Williams and Drake May are considered the top two guys. And there are guys certainly in the mix after that. Michael Penix, who's playing in the national championship game, Bo Nix, but those are the top two guys. And so if you look at, let's just assume the Bears do take Caleb Williams at one. Washington currently sitting at two, and they have a really small strength of schedule advantage over New England. Washington has lost seven in a row. It's really hard to imagine they're going to beat the Cowboys on Sunday at 4:25, which is when Giants Eagles begins, by the way. Um, Especially because the Cowboys, if they win the division. So let's assume Washington loses that game and hangs on to the number two pick. Um, there is some variables here because if the Jets find a way to beat New England, I wonder if the strength of schedule could tip to the point of New England getting the second pick. But I think no matter how you slice it, I don't see Washington or New England at number two passing on Drake May, or if say May goes one, passing on Caleb Williams, right? So um, that's a scenario where I think it's really unlikely, even though it's mathematically possible that the Giants are it's hard to imagine them sneaking into the second pick. They need so much to go their way. Um, and which would mean Caleb Williams and Drake May almost like very likely gone. As
I
far as
see
the
them being gone anyway after two. Like even if the Bears, let's say the Bears trade down to try to get one of the lesser quarterbacks, like
well,
8 or 9, like whoever's trading up is taking a quarterback. So
sure. The
yeah,
question just becomes what the only question would just be could the Giants get to two? And technically they can, but it would take a lot, including the biggest mountain that has to move is Washington just stunning Dallas. I don't think it's not going to happen. Washington's lost seven in a row. The coach is going to get fired. As far as the Patriots at three, and this is where it becomes really interesting. Let's say Washington loses and the Patriots stay at three, and the Patriots lose to the Jets. That puts them within striking distance of one, right? Of trading up above Washington, uh,
hmm,
getting a quarterback there. Um,
it's
and
interesting.
that quarterback could haunt the Jets for years to come. We know. I mean, who knows how this is going to play out, right? But there's a lot hovering over this Jet Patriot game, which, by the way, is at 1 o'clock. So the Giants will know if the Patriots lose, then that locks the Giants out of the number two pick, right? So, but this Jet Patriot game is just between the draft, Bill Belichick likely being gone, this being his last game in New England with the Patriots and in New England. Um, and the fact that the Jets haven't, not won there in forever, it's a really fascinating game, right? As you mentioned before we got on.
Yeah, in a way, it's like a must-win for Salah and these young. Like they're gonna deny that, but it's like any other game. But like the most stunned out of all the bad losses I've seen, and I want to like kind of clarify because it is a new. The Jets have done a good job of kind of building a new team, new culture, whatever you want to call it, over the last 2 years. So I'll just limit it to those. But the three losses since the arrival of Sauce Gardner, Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson, the three losses where you've seen just like stunned disbelief in the locker room and guys like not really being able to process it have all been to the Patriots because the Jets are better than the Patriots. I mean, they're just a better team. They're a more talented team. They have been, and they've lost all three of these games, and it hasn't like there's no reason they should have lost any of those games, and they've lost all three of them. So I think like this is really important to like the psyche of this team to win this game. But also, yeah, if they win it, it's probably going to hurt them long term. No matter what happens with Belichick, like you can argue like whatever happens, you could argue like he's going to want to win, stick it to the Jets the one last time, or he doesn't care because he knows they'll be sticking it to the Jets if they lose anyway. It's hard for me to see Belichick like letting the Jets win. So I'll just say that no matter what's at stake, and especially if he's not going to be there next year. Um,
Right,
but it
right.
just,
He's trying to
it's like
win. Yeah, he's trying to win.
yeah, all of it's interesting. But I mean, it just seems like whatever happens will be bad for the Jets. And I'm not even trying to be like negative or funny. It's just
The
how
Jets have
can you
lost.
feel like how can you if they win, it's going to hurt their draft positions significantly.
Right.
I don't think it's that big of a deal. I know a lot of fans get upset because whatever, but when you see like it's not like the Jets have made the most out of their draft picks anyway for the most part.
I
So
think the one that's in the bigger potential issue is that it would push the Jets winning will push them down, but more
that
notably
too.
push the Patriots up into the Drake May, Caleb Williams territory. And again the Zach Wilson thing is the biggest lesson in all this. We don't know if these guys are going to be good. Okay,
Yeah.
let's acknowledge that. Hovering over all this, as you mentioned, not just the Robert Saleh losses to New England, but the Jets have lost 15 straight overall to the Patriots
Yep.
since the can't wait game, which was 13 years ago, actually years ago, in the middle of January of 2011. The Jets are 2-29 against the Patriots, and they have lost all other games in New England, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Been
Channeling
on the
Mike
beat
Spencer
since
there,
2016.
counting
I've
on
not
there.
seen them win there, or in Miami, which is incredible. Or I've not
Yeah.
seen them beat the Patriots at all. I have not seen them win in Miami or New England.
Yeah, that's right. Since you've been covering the team, so obviously you're the problem,
Yeah,
not the Jets.
I think it's Connor, but yeah,
Yeah, of course, as usual. Easy to blame that Jamoke Connor. So 1, 2, 3, yeah, 12, right? 5, 8, yeah, 12 games. Oh, 0-12 in New England since the can't wait game. 15 straight losses overall and 2-29 overall against the Patriots since the can't wait game, and can't wait has become just the curse over this Jet team. So
Tom
that's
Brady doesn't play for the Patriots anymore. You
I
might
heard
also,
that, and it hasn't for
yeah.
a couple of years now, and they've had some pretty inept quarterback play with him gone, and the Jets still have not been able to get over the hump against Belichick. And so that's where the Patriots are 3. The Cardinals are at 4, and they do play at 425 against Seattle. I guess Arizona could win that game because they just shocked the Eagles, so that would help the Giants certainly.
What the hell?
So there's 2 of those 3 ahead of the Giants. I mean, the Giants could wind up at 3. I don't think they're going to wind up at 2. I think they could definitely wind up at 3. I don't think the Giants will beat the Eagles. But I suppose you never know. So I think the Giants could be looking at winding up anywhere from 3, 4, or 5. Probably not 2. But if you're draft watching, then all the games are at 425 in question. The Washington game, the Arizona game, and the Giant game, of course, and then the Pats Jets at 1. And then right behind the Giants are the Chargers and Titans at 5 and 11. And the Giants have a strength of schedule tiebreaker over those teams pretty decisively. So I don't think the Giants. At this point, it doesn't look like the Giants can fall any lower than 5. Based on how that strength of schedule looks. And if you go on Tankathon, which is the site I'm using for this, they use the strength of schedule for all 17 games. So they're factoring in the Eagles there. So that's only going to change by a minuscule amount at this point in the
Yeah, it's like a
season.
projection.
Yes, and the Jets, right. So they take the Eagles' current record, but if the Giants lose the game against the Eagles, that will make the Giants' strength of schedule stronger, if that makes any sense, because the Eagles will have another win. But it's one game out of a lot of games, so the percentages can only change but so much at this point in the year. The Jets at 8, number 8 right now at 6-10. But as you mentioned about the draft position stuff, they have 4 teams behind them at 7 and 9: Atlanta, Chicago, Las Vegas, and Minnesota. So unless I'm dumbly doing this, it looks like the Jets can't get any lower than 12, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But that could
That
be a
sounds
big
great.
fall from 8 to 12 or 8 to 11, I think.
Yeah, I
So
mean, and how high can they go? Um,
I think the Jets could technically get to 5.
so yeah, that's where people will
Just look at the one win. I
judge
mean,
you
who's
from it.
winning one
Yeah,
win?
yeah.
Because the thing to remember here is the Jets actually have the strength of schedule. The Jets' strength of schedule right now is 507. The Giants is 511. Those are the two best, let's say worst strength of schedules of all the teams in the top 8. And all the teams in the top 8 are the teams with 6 wins or fewer. Um, Now the thing to remember, look at the teams behind the Jets though. Atlanta, Chicago, and Vegas. And I'm not going to get into like reading off all the numbers, but their strength of schedule is all three of them are worse than the Jets. And Minnesota is the same as the Jets strength of schedule. And just to be clear, it's whoever has the worst strength of schedule gets the higher pick, right? So whoever stunk, two teams stunk the same, the team who stunk against the worst schedule is higher. And that's the first tiebreaker, not head to head. It's that. The head to head only comes in if the strength of schedule is the same. So yeah. Uh, I mean the Jets aren't drafting a quarterback, but they have plenty of roster holes.
Yeah, I mean, it would be they would like to be as high as possible just because we give them leverage to maybe pick a receiver or an offensive lineman. That's what it's going to be. I mean, it's going to be whatever the best available receiver or offensive lineman is what they're going to do, and
Well, they're
whoever's the
not getting
best
Marvin
overall.
Harrison,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So, I mean, if he somehow would fall, if they could somehow get up to 5 and or yeah, I guess that's the highest they could get. If they could somehow get up to 5 and he's still there, I mean, it's a no brainer. But I don't think that's
Yeah.
going to happen. So,
No, no. I think those he'll be
especially
gone
given how well young receivers have performed lately.
for sure. And there are some really good ones other than him. Malik Neighbors from LSU being a really good receiver. Rome Odunze from Washington, who will play in the championship game. PFF has him 10th on its big board. Neighbors 5th. The tackles to watch, of course, are the kid from Penn State. I'll just won't even attempt the first name, but Fashanu. He's the 4th overall pick.
You attempted,
Yeah,
or no, you
and
didn't. You
Joe
didn't.
Alt. There's an easier name, Joe Alt, from Notre Dame
Yeah.
at 7. I know, I know who he is, obviously, and so um, there's a gentleman, and I'm just going down this big board, and I had not seen this name before. And I'm going to be honest, I hadn't watched a lot of college football this year. Are you familiar with the work of a one Kool-Aid McKinstry?
I'm not. I'm not. I have not either. I've
I'm
not.
not kidding you.
Yeah.
He's a cornerback from Bama, and he's the 12th player on the board. I mean, I don't think either team will be in the mix for him, but that would be absolutely amazing. His real name is JaQuincy, which is also a cool name. So
Yeah.
yeah, the Joe Alt, JC Latham is another tackle to watch, but Alt is a really intriguing one. Obviously, as far as quarterbacks go, um, the question then becomes for the Giants if Williams and May are gone, do they pick Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Michael Penix? Those would be the guys probably. Um, I know people will see what people think about JJ McCarthy. He's playing in the championship game. If a really impressive performance there would really help his stock, but Daniels, Nix, Penix would probably be the guys after Williams and May. But then the question becomes: if you're fifth, if you're the Giants and you're fifth, are you taking that quarterback there, or do you think it's a reach and you take a receiver there and try to get a quarterback in round 2, or use your extra second round pick to trade up into the bottom of round 1? All these things come into play because at this point, with the Giants being bad, they're 39th in round 2. So they're not far outside of round 1 with that extra pick. And they do have the 46th pick as well from Seattle, which has really hit the skids. Um, so that trade for Leonard Williams, by the way, has turned out fantastic because Seattle's 8-8 right now, and that trade was made I guess right Halloween, right? The Seattle was 5-2 coming out of the October 29th game, which was right before the trade deadline. And since then they are 3-6. The Seahawks are 3-6. So that has unfolded nicely for the Giants in terms of the second round pick, shooting up the board, even though right Seattle's still in playoff contention technically. So that's what could really sink the pick is if the Seahawks make the playoffs, then they get pushed all the way down to that bottom group, right?
Yep.
Um, that's the thing to remember for people when you're looking at the draft. Um, right now, like say for example, like Pittsburgh is 18th because they're out of the playoffs technically right now at 9-7. Uh, but Green Bay and Tampa are behind them at 8-8 because they would technically be in the playoffs. So that's something to
Yep.
remember when you look at how the draft order shakes out, especially with that Seattle pick. But yeah, but first, of course, we got game Sunday. So what are your thoughts on
Well,
how?
yeah. Yeah, well, just real quick, and that's the other thing for the
Yeah, go
Jets.
ahead.
You mentioned the Giants having the pick early in the two picks in the second round, including one, at least looking like both somewhere at the early 40th at worst. The Jets don't have a second pick, a second round pick is going to Green Bay. So I guess the good thing is if you win, you're giving up a less great pick to Green Bay, but also, you're not going to have another pick after your first round pick to fill one of those needs until the third round. And right now, the way it stands is 8-72 for the Jets. So
Yep.
um, the lists of things they have to get done are not easy, and it's certainly much more difficult to get them done if you're picking at 12 and then 75 or whatever. So yeah, it's going to be a challenging offseason for a team and a GM that hasn't really rose to the challenge in terms of finding the players they need. If you look at obviously the roster and you look at the results on the field over the last 6 years.
Yeah, very thin margin for error. The Jets do have an extra fourth round pick, and it's 115 right now. That one from Denver. Trying to rack my brain for why they got that pick. Was it a move last year or something like that? Um,
Yeah, I'll remember it at
so
some
the
point.
Jets currently have four in the top 115, but two in the top 72. And if you consider the rounds 1 through 3, the premium rounds, they only have two picks in the premium rounds, whereas the Giants have four, 5, 39, 46, and 70, and then 105 in the four at the top of the fourth round. So certainly the Giants are in better position. Tankathon does a really cool thing, the draft power rankings. They don't always correspond to where a team is in the draft. Like Arizona, for instance, has been stockpiling picks, of course. They have by far the most powerful haul of the draft, considering, they've stunk, but also they have a lot of picks. The Giants are currently fifth. Uh, the Packers actually fourth in these in the power rankings, draft power rankings, just the total accumulation of the power of all your picks, right? So the Giants 5, that kind of tracks, right? And you think, okay, Arizona, that tracks that they'd be high considering all the moves they've made. Where are the Jets in these? Well, the Jets are eighth overall, but they're 21st in the draft asset power rankings, and that just speaks to, getting rid of how important it was to get rid of, or how like impactful rather it was to get rid of that second round pick. They're all the way down to 21st, so that just speaks to the and highlights the fact that, like you said, the margin for error is very slim for Joe Douglas this offseason.
Yeah, yeah, it is, and it's going to be interesting to see how they attack this because they're going to have to decide before the draft which way they're going to attack. That's just the way it works. They're going to have to decide if they are going to wait around and and try to fix their offensive line in the draft, or I mean, I'm guessing they'll try to fix their offensive line some in free agency, and then that'll give them the flexibility to add a big name receiver in the draft. But they have to kind of put themselves in a position to do both. So it's definitely an interesting juggling act. And by the way, the fourth round pick from Denver came from last year, a trade at the deadline when they sent Jacob Martin,
Oh wow.
an edge rusher, to Denver. Who the Jets had signed him as a free agent before last season. He didn't really do anything. His brother actually played for the Jets back in the day. You might remember him. I can't remember his first name, but the guy from Columbia who had the
Yeah.
concussions. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Interesting that they were able to get that for him. And the other thing to remember, of course, is Devontae Adams hovering over all this. Could the Jets trade
Yeah.
away more draft assets? And I think you'd be looking potentially at moving a future asset, not something in 2024. But let's see if, would the Raiders be amenable to that? That Devontae Adams talk is going to be reheated, heating up again this offseason, of course. because everyone knows he has ties to Aaron Rodgers, and the Jets need help at receiver because they can't just have Garrett Wilson be their only competent receiver. That hasn't worked out great for them. So, how will they address it? Typically free agency is not a great way to address the offensive line. So maybe you go Devontae Adams trade and then address the line in the draft. Then again, a very good draft, as we mentioned, for receiver, even outside of Marvin Harrison, with Odunze, the kid from um, Washington, and Malik Neighbors from LSU being the two top guys in addition to Marvin Harrison. So as far as these games this weekend, how do you see things going up in New England?
I can't I can't pick I just can't let myself pick the Jets against Belichick at this point.
Can't do it.
I've already done it like for most of the last 3 years, being like at some point they've got to win since Brady left. Clearly that's not the case. But that doesn't necessarily have to happen. So I'm gonna go Patriots 11, Jets 10.
I love it. 11-10. Would that be a scoregami, by the way?
I would
11,
doubt it because it's pretty
uh,
easy to get to 11. A 2 point conversion and a field goal, right? So
yeah, let me see here. Pro Football Reference, if you ever are curious, does scoregami. 11-10 would not be, but 11-9 would be,
um,
or an 11-11 tie.
yeah. I mean I would take all three, but I'm
I'll
gonna go
pick a
11
score.
10.
I'm gonna pick a scoregami. 11-9. I'm gonna
You're
pick
going with the
11.
Patriots? Okay.
Yep. I'm gonna
Yeah, we
say
see this. It's going to be a stupid game. Like, there's going to be some
3 field
stupid,
goals for the
something stupid.
Jets. The Pats are gonna have uh, a touchdown at some point, and for whatever reason, they're going to go for two, and then they're going to kick the game-winning field goal at the end to win 11-9. Scoregami. History in Belichick's final game. Um, and we'll see where he winds up because the Chargers need a coach. Uh, is Jim Harbaugh going to be in the mix for that? Maybe. I mean, who else? Who else needs a coach? I mean, from the over, I think the Raiders wind up hiring Antonio Pierce. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, he's clearly done a lot. And when you look at how poorly it worked out for them last time when their interim looked good and they just, moved aside and brought in McDaniels, I think all that combined, it leads to Antonio Pierce sticking around.
And Sean McDermott, I think, will probably be back in Buffalo. I mean, they're 10-6. Um,
Got to win a playoff game, I think. But yeah,
Going down the list, could Mike Vrabel be out in Tennessee at 5-11? Um, we mentioned the Raiders. We mentioned the Chargers. The Commanders will have an opening. I don't think Belichick's going there. What about the Eagles? They've been like, oh, man, what a hot mess they are right
I think
now.
that's like that has come out of nowhere when you start looking at the way they've been kind of shifting things around and panicking and
Yep,
they're not getting it fixed. Like I think that's suddenly a possibility that is shocking, but also the way they don't mess around when they're not getting the results they want. So
exactly. Jeff Lurie has been very decisive, and Howie Roseman too, and Lurie would obviously have the final say, but they're known for being bold, decisive for all things, all the decisions they've made that have helped build them into a team that won the NFC last year. It looks like Chicago's coach Eberflus is back. The um the rest of the NFC North is no movement there. I wouldn't think. I don't see Kevin O'Connell getting fired in Minnesota. Todd
yep,
could be done. Todd in Tampa could be out. Right.
he could be, but he's been. I mean, like I haven't looked at the playoff situation there. Are they out? Are they
No, they
in?
are still in it for their division. Even.
Yeah, I
I
think just
think
because of that and how little this team has been expected to do.
that's
This
fair.
is this is
Yeah.
Brady's second year, right? Like him
They
being
they
gone.
yeah. What?
So
Yes. Yeah. He was not.
he was not around last year
No,
either.
he
Yeah.
was. He was. He played in 2022. Yes.
Oh, he did. Okay. So his first year being gone. Yeah, I think the fact that he's kept him in it this long. Yeah, you're right. Because
They made the playoffs last year, and it was just kind of they were hanging on by a thread. But
yeah,
but they will clinch. All they got to do is win the division. Um,
yeah.
or
So I think
all they
he'll.
have to do
I
is
think
win their game at Carolina to win the division. So I mean that
yeah.
would take an uh, epic choke, um, to look. it's winning in, losing out, I think, pretty much for them. Um, and so, okay, maybe Todd stays. Dennis Allen in New Orleans. I mean, I don't think maybe not, but I think Belichick is an interesting one for well, and Arthur Smith in Atlanta could be gone. We know Carolina's got a vacancy, and Belichick isn't going there. And as far as the rest of as far as the NFC West goes, Sean McVay said he's going to be back today. And does Pete Carroll retire? I don't know, maybe. But the Chargers one's interesting because they need a GM too. And would they give Belichick the reins there? Would they give Harbaugh the
Yeah.
reins?
Yeah. I mean, it would be, especially with Belichick, I feel like it's a risk because he has not drafted well lately.
Yep, exactly.
And it's almost like I could almost see him going to a more, the Giants would have been in play, obviously, if if this year had been worse. But I almost see him going to a more stable situation where the GM is in place and he just worries about the coaching. But if
Could be.
I don't know if he's open to doing that at this stage of his career too. There's a
Yeah.
lot of questions.
Turned
And I mean,
72 in April.
and you can't even rule out the possibility of him returning to New England either.
I think
I,
it's a huge
yeah,
long shot.
I'm
There,
with you, but you never
it's,
know.
I mean, and look, I
It
mean,
feels like the end.
the post Brady quarterback stuff in terms of drafting and developing quarterbacks just hasn't worked out. And they missed on Mac Jones big time. So we'll see. As far as the Giant pick here, man, the Eagles are really, really scuffling. What was I meant to check this. Of course, the Eagles now 11-5. They have lost three of their last four games, three in a row. Niners, Cowboys, Seahawks. The crushing loss. Seahawks beat. They had to scramble to hang on in the second half on Christmas and beat the Giants. They have not looked good since really, well, they polished off their fifth straight win by beating the Bills 37-34, and that game was on uh, November the 26th, so Thanksgiving weekend. They've really just fallen off. As far as that Cardinal game, I'm gonna just see if I could find the line for that game, whatever it was. The Cardinals pulled off a big time upset there. Um,
It was double. It was. I think it was 10.5.
10.5. Okay.
I think 11
And
and a half.
that's Vegas recognizing, of course, that the Eagles are just a mess right now. All the changes they've made have not paid off in terms of the Matt Patricia for Sean Desai coordinator change. And now the heat is really on Nick Sirianni, who was not long ago a darling, and the guy couldn't lose. Remember, we were talking about those stats about how they had been tied for the best record in the NFL for X number of weeks and how things have really changed in a month and a half.
Yeah.
I don't think the Giants will win this game. They just don't have the talent level, of course, and they don't. And I know Tyrod Taylor played well in the second half in Philadelphia, but the Eagles are desperate. They need to get right. I think they will. I don't think it'll be a pretty game. I think the Eagles have one and done in the playoffs written all over them, and then potential changes that come with that. But the Giants are just not a team right now that can, with the current composition of where they're at, can really execute it at a significant level. So you just saw it against the Rams. I mean, I understand that Tyrod Taylor is a better option than Tommy DeVito. Of course he is, but um, yeah, they're just not good enough right now, and they're not executing well enough right now to beat a team like the Eagles that is better and desperate. So I don't think it'll be a blowout, but I will say Eagles 28, Giants 17.
Yeah. I'm man. It's just hard to believe. Like the Eagles are, one of the only teams. I think them, the Broncos, and maybe one other team, the 97, 98 Broncos, and maybe one other team that has started 9-1 in consecutive seasons, and all of them have won a Super Bowl. And now, it sure doesn't look like the Eagles are winning a Super Bowl this year.
No.
Um, I mean that loss to the Cardinals. If there was, I mean, already all the red flags have been waving, but my God, um, it's just proof that they are not it is not working right now, and I think it's probably a combination of things. But mostly your star is not quite playing at that level, and there being more tape on Hurts and what he does, and Kelsey maybe not being the same guy, but I think yeah, it's enough to beat the Giants, but it just seems like the book is out on them, for the playoffs. So I think it'll be even closer. I'm going to go 24 to 19. Get the nines working this week. But yeah, 24 to 19 Eagles in a sloppy game. And yeah, I have a hard, it's just hard to see the Eagles like figuring it out at this point. When you lose a game like that to your ex defensive coordinator, especially a guy who you guys had, you know, basically there had been some grumblings after the way the whole interview thing went down at the Super Bowl too, that they were kind of like better off without Gannon. And
Yeah.
well, maybe not so much. And then you lose to him. So yeah, it's a mess. And it's really going to be interesting to see because they certainly have the talent to recover, but it's been more than a month long tailspin, and really, it's been a team all year that hasn't really played well.
Yeah, for sure. So with that, we will leave it and be sure to like, rate, review, subscribe on all your favorite podcasting platforms. And thanks everybody for listening. As always, NJ.com/Giants, NJ.com/Jets. Thank you for reading. Happy New Year. I hope everyone had a great holiday. And we will be back. Let's see. So the games are Sunday. There'll be some, as we call it, baggy day, the last day of locker room access with players on Monday. And I would think probably the GMs will talk Tuesday or Wednesday. We'll wait till both GMs talk. And maybe you get some owner press conference stuff. I will be interested
We're
to see.
expecting that from the Jets, but we'll see.
Yeah, okay. So and then maybe the Giants too. So by perhaps we might wait until next Thursday or Friday to do another one of these until after we've had some time to cover, write about, and digest everything that's said by the powers that be for each of these organizations as they try to get things back on track, rebuilding wise in 2024 after pretty promising 2022 seasons. The Giants more so than the Jets. Really, this year just kind of a lost year for both of these franchises, and in some ways a step back. And we'll see what 2024 brings. Obviously, an enormous offseason for both of these teams, and we'll talk more about the offseason coming up, and we can kind of hammer down on some of these areas of need and what changes might be ahead for these rosters and these coaching staffs and these teams. And so at some point next week, we'll catch up with you guys, probably, like I said, later in the week. And then from there, we'll be a little more sporadic with the scheduling of these throughout the off season. And some of that will depend, I think, on news. Like if there's significant news, we can jump on and do one. But appreciate everyone listening. Thanks so much. Happy New Year and take care, everybody.